Hello everybody and welcome to the ICO's AI Auditing Framework webinar. My name is Lisa Tai, Lead Communications Officer here at the ICO. Joining me today is Ruben Binns, our Postdoctoral Fellow in AI, and Alistair Pearson, our Senior Policy Officer. For over a year, the ICO has been working to develop a framework that can be used to audit AI. This project aims to help organisations navigate the data protection pitfalls that might occur when developing and implementing AI systems. It will also shape the way in which the ICO regulates in this space. Last week, we launched our public consultation on our draft guidance on the AI auditing framework. So in the webinar today, we'll be looking at this guidance in more detail and discussing how our thinking has evolved since early 2009 and how it might influence the ICO's work in the future. We will discuss why it is important for us to consult with you on the guidance and the next steps of the project. We'll be answering questions at the end of the webinar, so please, if you have anything you wish to ask, email in to aiauditingframework@ico.org.uk or tweet them in to us at ICO News. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to Alistair.
Thanks, Lisa. I wanted to start by providing some background to the draft guidance that was published last week and to explain why we have produced this guidance, what have we done so far, how this guidance relates to other ICO work on AI, who the guidance is for, and how the guidance is structured. I'll then hand over to Ruben, who will talk about what we say in the guidance. So, why have we produced this draft guidance? We see new uses of AI every day, from healthcare to recruitment to commerce and beyond. We recognise that AI will bring huge benefits to organisations and individuals, but also risks too. We therefore made AI one of our top 3 strategic priorities and decided to develop a framework for auditing AI compliance with data protection obligations. The framework has 2 distinct outputs. The first is auditing tools and procedures, which will be used by our investigation and assurance teams when assessing the compliance of organisations using AI. The second is this detailed guidance on AI and data protection for organisations, which outlines our thinking to help organisations audit the compliance of their own AI systems. This guidance aims to inform you what we think constitutes best practice for data protection compliant AI. It is not a statutory code, and there will be no penalty if you don't follow our recommendations if you find another way to comply with the law. So, what have we done so far? In December 2018, the ICO hired its first postdoctoral research fellow in AI, Ruben, to research and develop the AI auditing framework and conduct further in-depth research activities in AI and machine learning. Between March and October 2019, we launched an initial call for input into the framework. During this time, we published 15 blogs designed to initiate discussion and debate about some of the risks to rights and freedoms that AI can pose. We've been developing and expanding these blogs and converted them into this more formal draft guidance. We've engaged extensively with stakeholders to understand how organisations are using AI on the ground. We've used these insights to produce the practical and realistic hypothetical examples included in the draft guidance to help illustrate the risks that AI creates or exacerbates. How does this guidance relate to other ICO work on AI? There are several initiatives across the ICO with links to AI, including the Sandbox, which is supporting organisations to use personal data in innovative and safe ways. Most of the current entries use AI in some way. In our investigations, we're looking at facial recognition technology in public spaces by law enforcement and companies in the private sector. We also host a Regulators and AI Working Group, which is an informal network set up by the ICO for UK regulators to share information and align approaches to the regulation of AI. And Project Explain, which has produced guidance on how organisations can best explain their use of AI to individuals. The draft guidance on the AI auditing framework is designed to complement the Explain guidance, and we recommend reading both in tandem. Most of this work can be traced back to our award-winning report on big data, AI, machine learning, and data protection. So, who is the draft guidance aimed at? There are 2 broad audiences that the guidance is primarily targeted at. First, those with a compliance focus, including data protection officers, general counsel, risk managers, and the ICO's own auditors. In other words, we will utilise this guidance ourselves in the exercise of our audit functions under the data protection legislation. Second, technology specialists, including machine learning developers and data scientists, software developers and engineers, and cybersecurity and IT risk managers. How is the guidance structured? We divided it into 4 parts corresponding to different data protection principles and rights. Part 1 addresses issues that primarily relate to the accountability principle. Sections in this part include data protection impact assessments, controller-processor relationships, and assessing and justifying trade-offs. Part 2 covers lawfulness, fairness, and transparency, covering lawful bases, statistical accuracy, and bias and discrimination. Part 3 covers the principles of security and data minimization in AI systems. Finally, Part 4 covers how you can facilitate the exercise of individual rights about their personal data in your AI systems, and rights relating to solely automated decisions. We have also structured the draft guidance to include a risk statement and some examples of controls you can take where a subsection heading relates to a risk that AI creates or exacerbates. The controls have been broken down into 3 categories: preventative controls, detective controls, and corrective controls. They are designed to provide you with practical suggestions. These controls have no statutory basis and are included as what we believe constitutes best practice. I shall now hand over to Ruben, who will discuss more about the content of the draft guidance.
Thanks, Alistair. So, as Alistair mentioned, we divided the guidance into 4 sections. The first section covers governance and accountability. So, in this section, we cover a range of different topics relating to the accountability principle. We start out by talking about what we mean by approaching AI governance from a risk-based perspective. We then move into topics around how to conduct a data protection impact assessment, and we found that while the best practices in a DPIA will still apply to AI, there are some unique challenges when it comes to assessing the data protection impacts of AI systems, which we cover in that section on DPIAs. We then talk about understanding controller-processor relationships in AI. So in many cases, the AI supply chain may be quite complicated, where you'll have multiple different organizations who are involved in different stages. And so this section sets out a number of different considerations there, where you may be a provider or a procurer of an AI system, and we set out a number of considerations which would affect your status as a data controller or a data processor, or in some cases a joint data controller. In this section we also discuss AI related trade-offs and how you should deal with them. So in many cases there are trade-offs to be struck when you're designing an AI system. So in increasing for instance, statistical accuracy, you may be decreasing privacy, or in increasing fairness, you may be decreasing privacy. So these kinds of trade-offs, we discuss them, and we give some advice on how to strike the right balance when you're designing AI systems that involve these kinds of trade-offs. In this section, we also mention issues around outsourcing and how you can assess trade-offs, controllership, accountability when you're outsourcing different parts of your AI system. The next section relates to the lawfulness, fairness, and accountability principles. So these, first of all, we focus on how you can identify the different purposes of processing data in an AI system. And this is necessary for you to do before you can figure out what the appropriate lawful basis might be. And one of the things we talk about is the distinction between training an AI system, where you're processing personal data in order to develop a statistical model that will allow you to make predictions or classifications. And that might be one purpose that has a particular lawful basis. But then we distinguish that from another purpose, which is actually deploying a model to make predictions or classifications about people. So where your model is deployed in the real world and is having impacts. In that case, there may be a different purpose and a different lawful basis that you need to consider. So then we move on to talking about statistical accuracy. So we begin by distinguishing statistical accuracy, which in the context of AI refers to the extent to which your system gets the correct answer in response to new cases that it's asked to make a prediction about or a classification about, and the accuracy principle in data protection, which is different because it relates to whether the data that you process about an individual is inaccurate as to a matter of fact. And so we distinguish these two, and we say that statistical accuracy is important in your AI system to ensure that you don't end up processing data about someone in a way that's unfair. So we define different kinds of accuracy, and we talk about the breakdown between things like false positives and false negatives, where the costs of errors to yourselves as an organisation and to data subjects may be different. We talk about how you can define and prioritise these different accuracy measures, and we give a set of questions you should ask yourself and measures that you can deploy to ensure that you've got the right level of statistical accuracy. Then we talk about the risks of bias and discrimination when you're using AI systems. So in many cases, because of imbalances in data, or because data may reflect real-world structural injustices or discrimination, your AI system may end up replicating or repeating those patterns of discrimination. So we talk about the reasons why that might be. We talk about the ways you can measure and assess if it's happening. And we also talk about the processing of special category data, where that might be necessary in order to assess the potential discriminatory impacts of your system. And again, we talk about the kinds of risks, how to identify them, and examples of controls that you can put in place to mitigate them. So moving on to the next part of the guidance, this focuses on security and data minimization. So these are two important principles in data protection. There are kind of security risks which are exacerbated by AI. So these are common security risks which you may be familiar with in some contexts, which are made harder to deal with in various ways as a result of AI. One of them is that AI requires data to be copied and transformed and moved around in lots of ways, which may mean it's harder to maintain proper records and access control. The other potential challenge is around the introduction of new kinds of software and code into your IT infrastructure that are necessary in order to build AI systems that may introduce new risks. We also talk about new risks that are introduced by AI systems. One of them is the fact that in some cases it may be possible to infer personal data from AI models. So we talk about why that might be and what measures you can take to mitigate against that. We also talk in this section about data minimization. So we consider different steps in the AI development and deployment process, and we consider the different possible measures that you can deploy to ensure that you're not collecting more data than you need to, and that you are that you're doing so in a data minimizing way. The final section deals with individual rights in the context of AI systems. So there are a range of individual rights that are that you need to protect at different stages of the AI development process. But because of the way that AI systems are developed and deployed, oftentimes personal data may need to be processed in unusual ways and managed in unusual ways, which may raise additional challenges when it comes to responding to individual rights requests. So, for instance, it may be harder to understand when and how individual rights apply to training data, to data that's used in the deployment of a system. And so we talk about a range of mechanisms that you can deploy to ensure that you can effectively respond to individuals when they seek to exercise those rights. So next steps, the consultation period started a couple of weeks ago. It's going to end on the 1st of April. so that hopefully gives you time to get in your consultation responses. And as I outlined in the beginning, the guidance is aimed at two different audiences, so risk practitioners and technology experts. So we particularly want to hear from people who work in these different roles. We're also interested in seeking the views of people in senior management roles, so those whose responsibilities include setting your organisation's risk appetite and for signing off on the deployment of AI systems. In addition to the consultation, we're also going to continue to develop tools for risk practitioners and tools for our own audit and investigations teams. So the feedback that we get as a result of this consultation will also go into informing our own operational procedures and investigations.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. I think that was a really interesting sort of explanation and detailed look at the guidance itself. Just going to give a reminder that you can email in any questions to us at aiauditingframework@ico.org.uk, or you can tweet us at ICO News. So we've had a couple of questions in, so let's get into those. So one of the first ones we've had in, will you be providing a summary of the AI auditing framework that is easily understandable and operationalisable by senior management? What will be particularly useful are simple statements of who needs to do what and when.
So I think we're getting some way towards that in the guidance that we've got. We think it definitely will take that on board. I think we've definitely got the what in the sections, in the boxes at the end of each section, which look at what risk controls you can put in place. But we could definitely do more in terms of specifying which kinds of roles should be doing which of those actions. So we'll definitely take that on board. Thanks.
Okay, another question we've got in. Could you provide an example of an AI audit work plan to help understand the questions you'll be asking in practice?
So for this, we can give a certain amount of information, and much of that is already in this guidance. For various reasons, we can't reveal everything about how our assurance and investigations teams work, because that may prejudice their ability to do their job. But we can certainly include the broad kinds of considerations that we would be taking into account when we do that kind of work.
Okay. So someone sent us in a bit of an example. They've said, say a company is using a vendor to screen CVs. The vendor algorithms are continuously updated based on improvements from multiple clients. So how would you approach the audit in this case? Who will get audited? Would it be a third-party vendor, or the company as a controller, or both? So a bit of a worked example there. How would that work in practice?
So I think it depends on the nature of the individual case, of course. But in theory, it could be any of those organisations, because they're probably all processing personal data in some way or another. So we have the ability to assess any of them. And it would depend in practice as to who is involved in which bits of the processing and which bits we're concerned about.
Yeah. And then one more question we've got. Are you seeking, or would you be happy to receive, more substantial responses in addition to the online questionnaire?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the questionnaire is there to get in the specific questions that we had, but we're very welcome to other considerations which we may not have thought to ask for. So please do send in anything else that you think might be relevant to us. And
people could just send that into AI auditing framework at ico.org.uk.
Yes.
Just have final check, see if there's any more questions came through. No, is there anything in particular that you're looking for people to focus on? Are there any areas that you're particularly interested in getting feedback from on the guidance?
I think we're looking for practical feedback, so where organisations have a chance to sort of pilot the draft guidance and some actual real world examples. It would be really beneficial for us to see how this draft guidance works in practice and see what works well and what doesn't work well, which will help us to improve on the final guidance.
So taking the guidance and applying it to, I guess, a variety of sectors, sizes of organisation and see how it applies to them.
Yeah, and we also want like a wide range of different sectors. We've put a lot of them in the examples in the draft guidance, but there are other sectors that we'd be interested in hearing from and seeing, one, how they're using AI to develop products in their sector, and two, how they're trying to overcome some of the risks that we highlight in the draft guidance.
Okay. So we've got another question in. Can you tell us how you could quantitatively assess the fairness of the machine learning model? So what metrics to use and what thresholds?
So we've given some thought to this in the section on bias and discrimination. We outline a range of different metrics there. I think the problem is it's so context specific that we can't say, across all sectors and across all contexts, this should be the threshold. We think that's something that each organisation will need to assess for themselves in their own context, weighing up the various risks to the rights and freedoms of data subjects, and considering how these things work in their own context. So we wouldn't be able to give specific thresholds, but we do think that it's important that these issues are given consideration, and they should be documented in your data protection impact assessment, for example.
So rather than us giving the threshold, it's more something for organisations to consider themselves, the same way they do with other elements of data protection law, and come up with their baselines and standards.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all we've got time for. But you can continue to send in your questions to aiauditingframework@ico.org.uk throughout the consultation process, and we'll try and get back to you with responses. All the information you need is available at ico.org.uk/AI consultation. It's open until the 5th of April, and like we've said, we really look forward to hearing your views. Sorry, it's the 1st of April, not the 5th of April. We really look forward to hearing your views, whether that's on this consultation itself, or like Ruben said, if you want to send in a more detailed guidance, some examples to aiauditingframework@ico.org.uk, we're more than welcome to hear that as well. So thank you very much for listening, and